Hello, I hope you're well in these extraordinary times. I'd like to welcome you to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena where we are hosting you here today. Joining me today is Jessica Lamb, the Chief Strategy Officer at WeLab Group. And, we've got some absolutely huge topics to discuss from the Hong Kong FinTech scene, WeLab themselves, and the new virtual banks over in Hong Kong. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining me here today. And could I get you to introduce yourself? I always find that's way better than me giving a spiel, and your role at WeLab.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me here. Lots of fun. Hong Kong is, very much bustling and still happening, albeit, in a slightly different way, given the impacts of COVID, which we can talk a little bit more about later. WeLab, we're a Hong Kong-born fintech company, probably one of the largest homegrown in Hong Kong. Started at a time when, fintech didn't really exist, back in 2013. So here I'm the Chief Strategy Officer, responsible for putting together the overall strategy for all of our subsidiaries and the different business lines that we run. As well as leading different strategic projects along the way. So I can talk a little bit about more in terms of coverage in our businesses in Hong Kong, in mainland China, and Indonesia. Lots of existing businesses as well as building out new ones, including the virtual bank which we just launched earlier this year. So lots on the horizon, never a dull moment, and never a dull moment in fintech and technology.
Yeah, I can imagine the last couple of months, just from a kind of outsider point of view, looking into WeLab, they must have been crazy. And I think I've actually got to kick things off by saying congratulations. For instance, I heard you guys got, was it 10,000 new users in 10 days for your new banking application?
Absolutely. This journey is, it hasn't been an easy one. So from one of the strategic projects that, I led back a year and a bit ago was actually preparing to get this license. We are one of 8 recipients of this virtual banking license in Hong Kong. And all the way from having absolute ground zero to launching a bank publicly, it took just over 400 days. Never did we think building a bank from scratch was possible, first of all, and secondly, brilliant team that we have here of technical minds, of financial minds, pulling everything together in 400 odd days. And so we publicly launched a bank to people in Hong Kong just over a month ago. And in the first 10 days, we've had overwhelming response and over 10,000 applications. Really, really interesting. And let me throw in some of that, which is, why is that so special? And Hong Kong's a market of 7.5 million population. So 10,000 and a 7.5 million is, quite extraordinary, especially given that, the concept of a virtual bank is very, very new. Hong Kong as a market is very, very well developed.
Yeah.
One of the most advanced financial centers in the world. However, they are so comfortable in the way they are. Things like, a virtual banker opening a bank account remotely from your mobile phone is extremely novel.
Yeah.
It was quite an eye-opener and really validated our belief that technology is something that the people of Hong Kong can accept. Just because they've never had it in the past doesn't mean that it's not something that they want. So that was, really, really positive to see. And I'll throw in one more thing there, which is, take a punt, who was our oldest customer? My parents were like, oh, I don't think I can open this. This is for the youngsters, right? But then, we had people, so the minimum is 18. Take any guesses on the oldest customer?
I've cheated here from my own notes, but I've heard you actually managed to get an octogenarian to sign up in 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
That's insane.
83 years old.
Yeah.
When we looked at the BI data.
Mm-hmm.
And then our first instinct was to go check it out to make sure it wasn't like a family or a friend, it wasn't like a ringer that we brought into it. We looked it up. It wasn't, it was through the public phase. It wasn't a family or friend who's, through a special access or what have you. And the completion time was, under 5 minutes.
You see, I find that amazing because, my parents are in their 50s, early 60s, and the concept of a virtual digital bank, they don't believe it exists, and they keep asking me, Doug, are you sure it's a bank when I tell them about the kind of the digital challenger banks over here? They keep asking me the concept that someone 20 years their senior can then just be like, I'm just going to do it. I don't know if it speaks volumes of, you know, the kind of the digitization and the kind of uptake of digital meanings in Hong Kong, or your offering. I mean, what do you think kind of your offering gave that octogenarian the kind of confidence to do it, you know, or the kind of intrigue to do it? What set you apart?
You know, I think it's, we thought about, should we interview this person, right? But we're like, look, out of respect and privacy, we probably shouldn't at this point in time. But from a lot of the different, surveys that we've done, because, you know, when you design a product, it's always important to talk to the users, get your feedback, understand in the product testing what works, what doesn't work, right? So I would break it down into sort of two buckets. There's those who are naturally curious, right? You know, or what we call the early adopters, and we've seen that in different parts of the world, where they need very little push and they're just naturally curious and need that part of it. And I think there's those who are skeptical and sort of follow the crowd, right? So when it's been popular for a while, then they're going to latch on because they feel more comfortable. And there's a lot of things that, you know, they don't feel comfortable to give with. And I can share with you. So one of the biggest apprehensions, I guess, is what your parents said, which is it really a bank? You know, is my money safe? Is my data safe, for example? So there's a lot of concerns in terms of the regulatory framework as well as the security. So it's about how do you communicate that and demystify it so people understand that, hey, you have the same deposit protection that all the other banks in this region have. We are regulated by the exact same authority, which is the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And, you know, when you think about security, just because we don't physically have a branch, you know, the technology, a platform that we're using is actually built for 2020 and beyond. In fact, I would almost, you know, argue that it may even be better. However, each their own, because all of it is tailored for our system. And so it's not really a fair comparison to another person's infrastructure. So I think it's a lot of that. And right now, I think some people are just curious and they're like, look, are you sure you can really open an account in 5 minutes? And then they test it out.
The race is on.
Actually, I think the fastest for us was 2 minutes 36, but we try to keep it around.
Wow. I mean, it just shows the exponentiality of technology and improving, where it used to take, was it a week for the letter to come back? Then, you know, 10 minutes on the original digital mobile apps, and now, you know, 2 minutes and a half. So that's absolutely brilliant. And you mentioned, obviously, that technology stack that you've got is future-proofed and beyond. But WeLab has been a staple part of, you know, financial services for a couple of years now, mainly in Hong Kong, China, and Indonesia. I mean, what is it now that you've moved into the fintech banking space? You know, have you noticed a change in how you're going to have to operate? Is there a change in strategy?
So actually, it's a expansion of our strategy or an execution of another phase of our strategy. Yeah. So when the company was started 7 years ago, we always focused on financial services, whether you call it banking or not. The origins was always around risk, understanding risk, credit risk to begin with, and then finding a use case for it, which was online lending, right? So there always needs to be a purpose. There's a purpose, which is to provide credit for those who are typically underserved because there is insufficient data in the market to enable them to do so. Because traditional methodologies, you know, are based on this scorecard, whereas we can use an alternative method of computing the scorecard or the analysis, right? So a lot of it comes down to how you put it together. So that hasn't changed, and that will never change, because that is the essence of who we are, which is how can we deliver a financial service in a way that is more efficient, right? Both from a process perspective, from a cost perspective, from a user experience perspective, right? But ultimately, you know, it is you're delivering that financial product. So right now with a banking license, we're able to do all that in a much broader suite. So it's not just credit related services. It's not just risk management related services. It could be savings, it could be payments, right? It could be wealth, it could be, all the other bells and whistles in your life, right?
Yeah.
But that is just a financial product. But it could also be everything else that is related to your daily life. When you think about spending, it could be something to do with your coffee consumption. It could be something to do
Mine's
with
pretty dangerous at this point.
health metric, right? So this is how data is extremely powerful to deliver a more personalized solution at the end of the day. So in a way, it hasn't changed your strategy. It is very much progressing it in a way that we've always envisioned in terms of how we can tie different parts of our life and lifestyle together. I don't want people to look at us like a bank, right? It is, yeah, we have all the good stuff of a bank, the license, the regulations, etc. But it should be so much more. We always find that so one of our visions is, we want to bring joy to your financial journey. And where that came from is that when everyone thinks about banking, it's like I don't want to deal with that.
No one wants to talk about it either. You don't go to the bar with your mates and say, "Oh, have you heard this new banking offering that I've got?"
It's never, and there's actually a little bit of like aversion, right? And so we feel that we want to flip that around in the future, that you actually are excited about it. And we won't get there overnight, but this is where you build trust over time and deliver good quality services for people to feel excited about. We're taking strides there. The first 10,000 was one way to go, and hopefully that trajectory will go on, and the feedback keeps coming back, and we'll keep refining the process.
Brilliant. And kind of going off on a slight tangent there, but I was interviewing a bank over in India, which is trying to improve financial literacy for children, and actually a bank account for teenagers. And one thing they were very focused on, and I want to know your view on if it will become a thing, is the social mediaization of finances. Now, they weren't going to put leaderboards of how much money their friends had, but they would certainly be including more visibility of where their friends were spending. Do you think that's something that has a kind of maybe a place in Hong Kong and as a way to kind of involve people more in finance?
That's an interesting concept. I've seen that work for one wealth management platform here, where they have a leaderboard of who has made the most in terms of their portfolio. Yeah. So it's percentage gain, or which, because it's mainly an equities trading platform. So it's basically, amongst our customers, this is the most popular stock, or in terms of turnover or activity, etc. So there is a bit of a competitive dynamic there, and I've heard that that's quite popular for that particular platform. It was recently acquired by a large U.S. fintech company. So that has proven to be popular there. Yeah. For us, there's different ways to use social media. Social media has been fabulous for us in terms of engagement. One thing that we're actually very proud of that we've done quite organically is built an Instagram following. I don't know what the latest count is, but last time I checked was well over 15,000 followers, purely organic. And we have a great team that just shares things that are relevant to them, and we are really, really blessed when we see users follow us, leave comments, share photos of our really pretty debit card that they like to show off or share with friends. And this is without any perks or offers. It's just
homegrown, kind of natural.
Absolutely. And I think the second thing is that we think that the sense of community or sharing is important, but it's also about the power of bringing more people together for a common goal rather than a competitive dynamic. I feel that sometimes competition could work in the other way, which is that you're encouraging someone to do something that's not right for them. So, Doug, what you want as your goal may not be what I want as my goal. So not necessarily saving more is better. It may just be that I'm saving for one purpose and you're saving for a different purpose, right? So it's not necessarily about more or faster. So I think there's a few different ways that we can use a social element. but that's sort of one of the things that we put together, which is a kind of like we call it a savings minibus in Hong Kong. So if you ever come to Hong Kong, you'll see on the streets that we've got buses, we've got an underground called an MTR. We have this very iconic feature in Hong Kong, which is a minibus. So it's like a 16, 17 seater. And
I took one all the way to the beach, snaking all the way through the mountains, and I've got to say, it's a lovely way to travel. You expect it to be pretty cramped, but there's a lot of wind going. It's very, very relaxing.
Fabulous. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's unique to Hong Kong because it's like a bus, except for it's smaller and it's a bit swifter, right? It typically carries less people, but doesn't stop everywhere, and it's known to have a little bit of a drifty feel to it. But it's quite iconic to Hong Kong. So we have a concept called Go Save, where if there's 10 people on this bus, your interest rate is, say, 1%. If there's 30 people on this bus, then your interest rate pops up to 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.5. So basically, the more it is, and the faster you fill up the bus, say up to, I think we're up to 100 people per bus right now, then you hit a rate of whatever, 2%. So you get the point. The more people on the bus, the more that everyone gets to benefit from this. So it's a concept of social, but also community. Now, the beauty about this is I don't know how much Doug has put into it. In fact, I don't even know if Doug has put into it or not, right? It doesn't matter. You can invite your family or friends or anyone else within the WeLab Bank community. And I think this has resonated with a lot of our early customers today. And this is just how we think about how can we deliver something that's quite boring, which is time deposits, but in quite a fun way. And the beauty of it is that we can offer this to our customers without penalties. So it's a 3-month time deposit, but if you want to withdraw. You can do that twice during your 3-month tenor. And you can start from as little as $10 Hong Kong. So just, €1.
That's incredible. I love that social aspect. That it's just absolutely brilliant. Everyone kind of working towards just improving themselves and the people that they love. So that's absolutely brilliant. Now, speaking of that kind of ecosystem and expanding it larger to Hong Kong itself, there's a lot of talk, and we focused, especially last year, on Singapore and fintech. What role do you think Hong Kong can now enjoy when it comes to fintechs? Do you think that the virtual banks are going to do more when it comes to outpacing this kind of competitor city, if you don't mind me using that phrase? But does Hong Kong even need to, realistically, at this point?
I think each market needs to operate in a way that makes sense for their own territory. Talked about this a number of times, which is, the regulatory framework for the Singapore virtual banks is very different from Hong Kong. People have asked, what do you think about it? And the way we see it is that it is designed in a way that makes sense relative to the state of the market in those jurisdictions, right? And also, what are we trying to solve, or what issue are we, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what solutions are we trying to deliver, right? So all we can say is, we feel that the framework that the HKMA has set for Hong Kong is appropriate for this market. Hence, we decided to apply for a license. And with the bank that we've established right now, we feel that it's appropriate to do that, right? Plus, we have, a very good understanding of this market. I think for Singapore, they are taking a lot of strides, in terms of mobile payments or online adoption. And it's had a very, very conducive sort of fintech or technology environment supported by the MAS and the FinTech Association of Singapore, right? So I think it's been a very, constructive market in that sense. I don't really see it as being competition per se. Yeah. What I will say is that, we will learn from each other. There are a lot of similarities in terms of the market. What we will say is that, we look at the Hong Kong and HKMA, and they were the first ones probably in this region to come out with the full framework. And they were quite bold to say, hey, full license from day one, you will be alongside all the other traditional banks in terms of how you can operate, etc. So that to me makes a lot of sense. I think we can learn from each other and see what works and what doesn't work. So I think that is probably the best thing.
I think that's absolutely brilliant hearing about that duality. But I mean, speaking more about that, the kind of virtual banks, day one, almost being in that same environment as those traditional banks. What do you think that's going to do for the fintech ecosystem of Hong Kong now that these 8 players are coming in, and they're like WeLab yourselves, you guys have so many different aspects you can bring in from your technology side. What's this going to do for fintech and the ecosystem?
So first thing I would say is you got to launch. You got to be in the market to have a role. So of the 8 players right now, to this day, 4 have gone public and launched. There are 4 that are at different stages of testing or trialing. So we always say this: you got to be out there to have a chance, right? I think the public has been. It's a balance between, is your product absolutely perfect, or have you done enough MVP testing such that you can go out now ensuring a few things, right? You are from a regulatory perspective, you are 100% compliant. That is extremely important, right? Security features, everything is safe. Now, if your UI UX is not the most beautiful thing, or there's something that I want to change that shade of blue because it's not quite at the Pantone that I want, I think people can be a little bit more forgiving on things like that, because you have not compromised the integrity of the product itself, right? So I think there are certain things where we're continuing to refine, we get customer feedback, but that is super important. Now, I think the role that the 8 virtual banks will play is, how do you, because I think we're all in this together, right? We need everyone to believe in the validity of virtual banks as a whole. We need people to feel comfortable with technology. We need people to feel comfortable that this is something that they can rely on in the future. The way we see it is, virtual banks are a new concept, right? It won't be accepted by everyone today, but give it a little bit of time. Adoption takes time. Adoption takes word of mouth, right? It may start off as being a secondary account. I've had people ask me, what am I going to do if I need to issue a check? Or what am I going to do if I need to deposit a check? And unfortunately, you said we don't provide that service. We suggest that you go to another bank to do that.
But I think it's good that you've ultimately highlighted what you can do well. You don't have to do the whole financial spectrum. You can just, you do what you do well. But if I could take you back to what you were speaking about earlier, just getting out there and how important it is. I find it interesting you say that, and you use the notion of UX and the coloring, everything like that. It's something that, especially in the UK with the challenger banks, people gush about, the coral pink or the glorious turquoise, and that's how they say that's why they became so popular. It's interesting that you say, as long as your groundwork is grand, you should be fine, which I think is really interesting because, as in the UK, the challenger banks are perceived to be UX focused, but maybe not so much in the background.
So this is sort of where I will jump in and say it's obviously a combination of both, right? What I've realized internally is that our standards are 100% every single time. So when I say it can be a little bit less, I'm probably talking like 90.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For other people, they're probably thinking, I don't know, 70. So this is my moment where I will do a little bit of show and tell and share with you.
Okay, that's iridescent.
That's perfect word. So if you look carefully, it says founding member up at the top. It's got my name. It's got the MasterCard logo and our WeLab Bank logo. Now, if you flip it over. So I haven't signed it.
You don't even have a number on the back.
There's no number.
Okay. So I got to ask then, how does that work?
This is a MasterCard debit card, okay? Very well understood concept of a debit card. There is no number because there is no need for a number on your card. Gone are the days where you need to scratch them with the machine, right? I lived through that when I was, a bit younger. I've watched enough movies to know that. But the thing is, you don't need a number. Everything is done via the chip or your magnetic stripe, right? So if I go to a restaurant right now and if I sign for my meal, pop it down, Hong Kong we sign, we don't really use the chip all that much, right? So you sign for your meal, there's no concern that someone is going to go online shopping and buy 5 pairs of sneakers using your credit card.
Yeah.
So that's that. Now, for most places, you can probably tap if it's a small value purchase. That's okay. So I know your question you're asking me is like, so what if I need to make an online purchase? What do? There's a virtual card in the app. And I would show you, but it would take a little bit of time. But
that's the magic of editing.
So there's a virtual card on the app.
Yeah.
All your numbers are safely stored on your app. And then what you do is you copy and paste and you go online shopping and Bob's your uncle. So that's how it works. So we thought about this because we're like, there is no need for your numbers to be here. The merchants don't need to see it. You don't need to see it on the daily, which is why I'm happy to flash it around, show you everything, no issues whatsoever. And then the thing is, if you lose the card, we'll just pop in the app and say lost card and suspend all transactions. So if Doug gets his hand on this, you can't go crazy and start tapping and buying.
You see a lot of shoes and a lot of jackets. But I think that's absolutely brilliant in terms of just looking at a problem, not even a problem, just kind of actually looking at the staple that's always been in the financial services industry and saying, does it need to be there? Yeah, rather than just assuming it has to be there, looking at the ground up and chucking it. I think that's quite cool.
It's just thinking about it. But look, one thing I will say, so this is also an ATM card.
Sure.
So basically for Cirrus and ATMs around the world, we can plop this in and withdraw cash.
Yeah.
Whilst we love to do a lot of things controlled from your mobile phone, we recognize that there needs to be an intersection between the physical world as well as the virtual world. And one thing is, this actually makes people feel that the bank is real because it's something quite tangible that they can hold on to. And then when they make a purchase, like when I make a purchase of my coffee, there is that delightful feeling, which is very much the teal card concept or the bright coral card that you've been talking about. It makes a difference from a feel perspective. Definitely.
As someone that doesn't use mobile payments, just because I prefer having that segmentation, I think that choice is so important. And I've got to ask then, because I used to live in mainland China, and when I was over there, it was still very much cash dependent. Even though I had my Weixin and I had my QR code, a lot of the times I was still just paying in cash. Now, that has, in the last 5 years, that has changed so much. And we've seen obviously the QR code adoption has become so much stronger. I mean, was there anything that you could pull? Because obviously, being the strategy officer for the whole region, was there anything you could pull from mainland China and some of the really cool goings on over there when it comes to technology and incorporate it into the Greater Bay Area and WeLab's virtual bank offering?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a lot of different insights and findings from each of our businesses are run independently, in terms of data, in terms of teams, etc. Sure. However, there's a lot of sharing of insights, right? There's a lot of sharing in terms of, how did we overcome this problem to identify that? One trait which is, because the data sets that we use and the privacy protection laws are different in each jurisdiction, so you need to adhere to that. But one thing that we've been able to share is behavioral insights. So for example, one thing that's very important to us is fraud detection, or understanding people's behaviors, right? Simple things, super simple. Simple things like, does your GPS location match where you are is one thing that a lot of people have talked about. But, we did some studies with our user base in China, which is depending on what time they make their applications for their loans, there's a high correlation between, delinquency or good credit or bad credit performance, depending on what time that they submit their loan application.
Wow, I've got to ask, when should I not be applying for a loan?
So what do you think? Well, I'll give you three time periods, okay? So between the hours of, 2 and 9 p.m., between the hours of, 9 and 5 a.m., and then 6 to, 12 noon during the day.
I've got to say, it's got to be the early mornings, 3 a.m.s, the 9 p.m. to the 5 a.m.
Spot on.
Yeah.
It's so I think the result was you're 3 times more likely to be so worse credit profile, basically, for those applying between those sort of midnight 2 to 5 a.m. type time frames. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense from a logic perspective. So we always do 2 things. One is, what is the data telling us, right? And then the second thing is, does this corroborate with logic? So we always say experience isn't everything. So don't just use logic to use this. Look at data over a period of time. Data doesn't lie, right? And a lot of it is, because if I'm probably a little bit more desperate and I can't sleep at 3 a.m., it tells you something, right?
Yeah.
In terms of,
never make a big financial decision when you haven't had enough sleep. So
along those lines.
Yes.
So that's definitely a very, one area of insight. But, in terms of technology, even when it's something simple like OCR scanning technology, how have we been able to recognize different things to improve the, user journey, right? How can we, how do we understand, let's say, social media usage or payments usage, frequency? How does that impact their behavioral decisions in a different market? We've managed to cross-reference that from Hong Kong, our findings, to China, to Indonesia, and then it all comes full circle, right? So that's how we sort of get the best of both worlds, rather than just saying that this is how it's worked in one market and this is the way it's always going to be. So that's the beauty of having an organization where we run different operations, but have that scalability to leverage off each other.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. And it kind of leads me on to my last question, and that's looking to the future. Where would you say fintech's going, and where would you say WeLab will be going?
So one thing that we've always felt very strongly, which is, build the technology or leverage off the technology that you have. Use it for your own users, but how can you do more with it? Which is why we built out a B2B services zone, right? Which is about how do you enable others to also use this? Everyone worries about competition. We're like, yes, competition exists in this world, but it's never a, it's never a one-person market, right? There's plenty of opportunities in the market for everyone to have a piece of the pie, right, at the end of the day. So it's about, okay, now that we've built our technology, how have we been able to enable others? And that's what we started building out, which is, licensing our technology out to others as a service on a cloud platform. So you can cherry pick what makes sense for you. And that is something that is a strength of Hong Kong, actually. If you look at the majority of the fintech players in Hong Kong, I would say close to 80% of them are actually B2B service providers. And I think a lot of that is because of the cost it requires to fuel a B2C business in this part of the region. Having said that, there is actually a lot of very, very strong ideas and technology and know-how. And B2B is great, because it is actually extremely scalable. Obviously, if you transport it to a different market and framework, there's some tweaks that you need to make along the way. It can't be a plonk here and a plonk there. Yeah. But by and large, a lot of the framework is very scalable. The only ask that I have for a lot of corporations or larger organizations who would benefit from this B2B is keep an open mind and give some of these technology players a chance, right? Because we've heard, so one of the other hats that I wear is I sit on the board of the FinTech Association of Hong Kong. where basically we represent the voice of the fintech community here as a not-for-profit organization where we try to advocate, collaborate, and educate people on fintech and its use cases. And a lot of times that we see that the fintech community is very supportive of each other, but sometimes what we need are allies from the big banks or the corporate world embracing us as well, or embracing other technology players into it as well. So I think one of the guests that you spoke to earlier, Mehdi at DBS, what they've done from their platform has been extremely encouraging to bring in a lot of fintechs into an incubator program and developing them and using their technologies in different parts within the organization. So that is something that we really would encourage a lot of financial institutions and non-financial institutions to embrace and support. And this is the same in whether it's Hong Kong and whether it's Singapore, which is another region that you talked about there. And technologies are very, very much fungible, transferable, should I say, and hopefully not just in Asia, even in Europe or the US, if it makes sense to do so.
Yeah, I mean, especially in Hong Kong and mainland China, I think there's such a brilliant chance for intersectionality between the tech world and the finance world. And it sounds like you guys are really championing that.
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right. I didn't mention mainland China because in my mind, that's what we do every day. Yeah. Because a lot of our technology is either, harnessed in Hong Kong or harnessed in China in different ways. And we're always working out how we can build synergies across our different platforms. So to me, that is an everyday thing that already happens. So we didn't talk specifically about that. But very much so, it is actually very unique to have that platform. And the key thing is, don't think that just because it works in one market, it will work in the other. Very different in terms of preferences. There are a lot of findings, but there is a lot of localization. So if it's a market you're not familiar with, find a local partner, which is what we did in Indonesia. We partnered with one of the largest Indonesian conglomerates there, PT Astra, to start our joint venture. So I think it's okay. You don't need to be the champion at everything. It is okay to get some help and recognize where, there's areas where you need to continue to grow.
But I think that's so important for a company like WeLab to be able to say, we do have all these brilliant developers and tech staff, but actually, someone else can help us be better, and to have that kind of ownership of what you do well is so important for a company DNA, I think.
Absolutely. We want to strive for more. We have this saying, which is part of our culture book, which I would encourage everyone to read on our website, which we just want to write down what we feel is right for us. And, one thing we say is we want to do things 10x better, which is how can you think outside the box? How can you create something that is, much better than what the present state is, right? But at the same time, recognize that, hey, we don't have the expertise, or that is not something that we're good at. So who can help us? Is it another fintech? Is it finding a partner? Do we need to build it in-house ourselves, or can we leverage off others? So I think that is a very, very important characteristic that we have as a team. And truly, it's a team that brings us all together, all 900 employees, across the different markets. So we're continuing to grow, and really excited about the ventures that we have, in the horizon. And we hope that the audience will continue to support us on that journey.
Amazing. Well, Jessica, I hope that if I ever get back to Hong Kong, I'll be able to open an account with you guys. And I think that's all we have time for. So, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug.
Excellent. And to all our viewers, of course, thank you as well. And you can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com and, of course, LinkedIn and YouTube. So thank you once again, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.